Hidden Object Guru here with another look at games I've played recently. As always, I'm going to be scoring these out of 10 based on how interested I am in playing more of them. First up is Zack's Tarion. This shooter has some solid Asteroids vibes, with enough complications to keep things fresh. It's a high score chaser where the player has to constantly shoot asteroids to mine for gold and health gems. The inclusion of a refillable health bar and purchasable upgrades are a nice addition to the formula. Less pleasant is the limited ammo the player has. The ship can fire just a handful of times before running dry, forcing the player to weave through the playfield to grab refills. There's a decent amount of steps to the gameplay. Kill evil skulls to obtain rhodium that can be traded for the titular Zack's Tarion. That's in turn used to purchase new ships. It's not in the league of Asteroids Recharged, but certainly a solid arcade title. 6 out of 10. Torpedo. A couch combat game about submarine death matching. Torpedo has a great feel to it. The simulation of sluggish underwater movement is extremely convincing, and the similarly slow torpedoes and harpoons the player have to defend themselves with give the whole thing an extremely strategic pace. There's also a good variety of game modes. Straight deathmatching and collecting radioactive globs are interesting enough. But the real standout is the wreck exploration mode, where players have to race each other through an obstacle course chased by giant buzzsaws. Since the ships can only fire forward, every match is a matter of balancing getting far enough away from the saws to remain safe, while staying out of the other player's sights. It's interesting enough that I found myself wishing I had 4 controllers rather than just 2 to play with. 7 out of 10. The Great Ocean. Undersea exploration is a consistently intriguing setting. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but give me an opportunity to drift under the waves, cataloging fish and coral, and I'm absolutely there for it. The Great Ocean has some decent potential to impress as a VR entry in the genre. The scanning and picking up garbage gameplay both work great, but at the moment it's a little too buggy to recommend. The game kept locking up on me, there's an issue with graphics popping in, and the world is pretty underpopulated. That said, it's currently in early access, so they have plenty of time to get it to a state where I'm psyched to play the rest of it. 5 out of 10. Transformers: Beyond Reality. Rail shooters have always been a favorite of mine. Ever since my first experiences with light gun arcade games, I've had a passion for any shooter that handled all of the movement for me and allowed me to focus on the blasting. VR has completely rebuilt this experience, essentially perfecting it. There's basically never been a better rail shooter than Rush of Blood, the Until Dawn VR spin-off extravaganza. But since that's no longer playable, we have to rely on games like this to fill its void. This is an extremely well-made example of the genre, though. Good variety of weapons, lots of dodging, original Transformer voice actors. It's exactly the thrill ride I wanted it to be. And as a rail shooter obsessive, I know what I'm talking about. My only complaint? It's only available on PSVR right now, which is a pity, because the Move controllers just aren't up to snuff for quick action games like this one. Still, I'm psyched to get through the rest of it. 8 out of 10. Construction Simulator 22. This is my second Construction Simulator game, and I've got to say, I'm growing quite fond of this series. Once again, the player is put in charge of a construction company that has to build up from paving driveways to completing giant public works projects. The details of maneuvering huge vehicles and using them to transfer heavy equipment is as satisfying as ever, and the graphical upgrades are just shockingly high quality. There's even a new mode where you actually have to walk around maps as a 3D character rather than simply teleporting from one vehicle to another. Now, this did get me into trouble once or twice. I kept wandering into weird places and getting trapped there. And while the developers were smart enough to include a reset position option, it tends to teleport me quite far from the work site, which necessitated a whole bunch of sprinting. Still, it's engaging enough that it could easily wind up being my new treadmill game. 7 out of 10. Rift Loopers. This is a multiplayer-focused Crimson Land-style shooter, where players face off against endless hordes of enemies, passing levels to unlock upgrades that last the rest of the run, and collecting currency to unlock new classes and abilities for future runs. The combat is solid, but it really suffers when I attempted to play it single player. Given that enemies swarm without ever offering a break, there's no way for players to heal without having a medic on the team. This means that in single-player mode, Medic is really the only playable character class. Having enemies drop health would go a long way to making this a lot more accessible. There's a bigger bug for them to squash though. Every time I paused the game, my joystick stopped moving the character, and I had to switch over to the keyboard and mouse. It reset every time I started a new run though, so it can't be that big of a problem, and hopefully they'll get it fixed soon, so I can play a little more of this. 4 out of 10. Food Truck Simulator. Basically, this is just cooking simulator with some driving action added, and it plays extremely well. Players rehab a decrepit food truck, buy ingredients, then make basic takeout food to order. It's exactly what you want out of a food truck simulator, should that be of interest to you. It's not a niche that I'd ever considered before, but now that I've played it, I've got to say it works very well. The only thing that I could see improving it would be a VR version, as cooking multiple burgers at once with just a mouse rather than 2 hands gets a little awkward, especially when I'm asked to manually move things from place to place. The action gets just hectic enough to keep things interesting, and overall, it's a pretty charming experience. 6 out of 10. Electrician Simulator. I played the demo version of this some months ago, and this game fulfills all of the promise that preview offered. Having rewired a few outlets and replaced a few light fixtures in my day, I'm finally able to comment on how accurate one of these job simulators is. The answer? Pretty good! While the game goes out of its way to remind players that this is just a simulation and not to use it as a basis for real-world electrical work, I've gotta say, the fundamentals are actually pretty good. Always shut off the breakers first, use a multimeter to diagnose faulty wiring, and, of course, always keep any screws you remove in a small box so you don't lose track of them. In a cute meta experience, the players train for the electrician's license within the game by using a VR headset. Now I can't wait for the VR version of this so things can get, double meta. 7 out of 10. Slime Girl Smoothies. Well, this is a weird one. It's a puzzle game about helping slime girls mix drinks in oddly lewd ways. The player takes on the role of a topless bar's new manager. The assignment? Make sure the slime girls eat the correct items in order to allow them to, and I hope this is the right word, extrude the proper drinks. It's bizarre, a little disgusting, and probably someone's fetish. The pornographic content aside though, it's a fairly interesting puzzle game. Basically, the player has to arrange colored blocks next to one another to build up flavor points, hitting specific targets without filling up the board or running out of turns. It's extremely clever, and I'd be down to play a non-pornographic game using these exact same mechanics, should someone decide to make one of those. 6 out of 10. I've been the Hidden Object Guru, thanks for watching. We'll be back here for more video game reviews once I've had a chance to play a few more games. See you back here for that, but until then I'll say that's right. Au revoir.